you have tiled walls and tile floor in your bathroom and you've been scrubbing all damn day to try to clean up the mildew, well, I'm going to teach you how to put epoxy over the walls and floors in your bathroom. I'm the handyman Ken, my name's William Plumstead, and we teach you everything you need to learn how to fix everything in your house. To do it step by step and give you some quick tips. Stay tuned. You're going to want to take off your shower doors. We loosened up on the screws. And this sucker is super heavy. Be very careful. If you have two people, have two people help you out. This shower door is probably about 80 pounds. So you give it a nice clean line. See how it starts to curve down right here on top of the saddle? I don't want to cover it right here with tape because when you put the epoxy on it, you're going to get a lot of drip marks there. So instead I'm going to end the tape line right here, and then once we're done, if the customer decides he wants to do the whole entire saddle, that's fine. I can go back with a brush. I don't want any drip marks.
Okay, so we've prepped the entire area. We've taped down basically all of our edges, all of our clean lines, so that when we epoxy, everything looks absolutely precise. And then we plasticed all the walls, or the shower door walls, so that when we are epoxying, you don't see any drip marks or anything that may come down. We did the same thing with the fixtures. We taped them down. We took out the shower head completely so that the cord didn't bounce against the wall and get into the epoxy. So now what we need to do is prep the walls. We're going to do that with isopropyl alcohol in a spray bottle and just spray it all down, and then we'll be ready to epoxy.
You want to spray your whole entire surface with alcohol or acetone. Clean the walls properly. If you do not clean the walls properly, and there's any soap or any residual solvents on there, it will not adhere right. The temperature inside the room when you put the epoxy on vertically or on the floor needs to be above 70 degrees. Between 70 and 75 is ideal. So we're going to finish cleaning these walls off. Once these are completely done, I'm going to start mixing up some epoxy. Vertical epoxy is totally different from doing floor epoxy. The floor epoxy will tend to run, it will tend to travel on down to the lowest point. When it comes to doing vertical epoxy, you cannot use the same type of epoxy you use on a floor. It's more like a paste. When you mix it, you're going to be mixing 2 parts of this, which is your resin, to 1 part of hardener. And the tools you're going to need is a drill gun, a stir. I recommend putting one of these type of stirrers on your stir gun. This one does not have any sharp edges in it, so when I mix it, it's not going to chew into my bucket. If you buy the kind of Lowe's, it will tear your bucket up and you have epoxy all over the floor. I set up my workstation. I covered down everything with paper, and then when I'm pouring, I put plastic over my paper, so if I spill anything on top of the plastic, before I do my next pour, I'll put another piece of plastic down and start it over, the process over all again, keep everything nice and neat. You can see our walls are totally prepped. Everything's covered completely right here and taped. So when I apply the epoxy on the walls, if it drips down, it will land on top of the paper, not on the floor. We're gonna be doing this over a 2-day period. I'm gonna be doing my walls today, and tomorrow I'll be doing my floor. We're gonna be using 2 different types of epoxy. One for the vertical, which is this one right here. And we're using a floor epoxy for the floors. The problem with the floor epoxy, it comes so, when you apply it, it dries very glossy. If you don't want a glossy finish, you can use like a sandpaper. I recommend like start off with like a 220 and work your way up and you get the finish you want to get.
Alright, you're on.
I'm on, okay. So like I said, this is 2-part resin to 1-part hardener. Make sure when you scoop out your resin and you put it inside your bucket, do not use this tool again after you mix with the resin. Clean it off thoroughly. If you cross-contaminate, you're gonna ruin your whole entire product. So make sure everything's cleaned. Do not use the same bucket again. Once I mix both products inside this bucket, it dries. I have about 2 minutes to mix it together. It's gonna get really warm. If it gets too warm, it's gonna cook inside the container. I'm done. So I wanna get out of the container within 2 minutes. I'm gonna start in the bottom part of the shower wall and work my way up. I'm gonna be using a steel trowel, a metal steel trowel, and working my way up. They recommend you do a flood coat. You don't need to do a separate coat over the grout lines, then come back over and do a flood coat. You could do it all in one coat, one heavy coat. This particular client does not want a super heavy coat, nor does he want to see a super high gloss finish. So I'm going to do just a strictly light coating over the whole entire wall surface of the grout lines to keep soap and discoloration on the grout. That's it. We're just basically trying to seal off the tile and the grout to make it easy to clean. So let's get started. This is like peanut butter. I mean, look at this thing. Looks like you want to eat it, right? But I don't recommend doing that.
It's like more like gooey marshmallow.
Like, remember that stuff called Fluffernutter?
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's what it
like
reminds
marshmallow.
me of. Yeah. What a mess. We have 1 pint of part A, and now we're going to put it in the hardener, which is going to be a half a pint.
Part A being resin.
Part A is resin, that's correct. Ding, 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 ding. So she's holding up because it's really hard to see it. It's so clear. Come closer, Angela, with the camera.
It's always best to measure at eye level.
Can you see where it's at? All right, a little bit more. And you want to go completely around the cup to make it even. This stuff's almost like a gel. Reminds me of like aloe oil, aloe vera. Is that right? I think that's.
Oh, there's jelly.
Does it look pretty close right there?
It's so hard to see. Yeah, I think you're.
I think we're right about there. Okay. So now
Yeah. If I looked up to the light, you're on.
All right, put that down, hold it in place. Now comes the fun part. You want to start really slow. They say to mix it for 10 minutes. Can you see how it's collecting to the stir? See that? It's almost like mixing a cake. It would get thin, less consistency. You start stirring it more and more and more. Now once it starts loosening up, you know you got a pretty good stir. I already did.
Oh, I can't even tell.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Let's spin it a little bit more to get the rest of that out. No, I meant, it's not like that at all. Yeah, let that go for a second. Try to get as much off as you can. Alright, you're good.
Okay, we're good.
Alright, now here's the fun part, quick.
Now we have to do this really quick. Diane is the king at trowel. She's putting a bunch of globs in at the bottom, and we're going to come back with the steel finishing trowel and go from the bottom to the top. You have about 3 minutes to get this out of your tub, otherwise it's going to bake.
No pressure.
She'll probably screw up, but I'm used to that. Oh, okay.
Can you curse on YouTube?
No. Now, if I was doing it, I'd be done by now. Are you done? Are you done yet? I'm like it. Anyway, so once you're done doing this,
You done the shelf already, right?
yeah.
We're gonna have an extra load. What are we gonna do about that?
Start from the bottom and work your way to the top.
Did you realize that you knocked one of these little anchors off?
Now, and then once you do that, come back and cover your grout lines. I'm trying to make a really thin coat over my tile and just cover the grout lines so the void's filled in with the epoxy. Day 2, we're getting ready to do the epoxy floor, putting some alcohol, cleaning everything up really well, and then once the floor is totally clean, we're going to be covering up the drain line with some tape and moving forward.
Alright, here we are, day 2 of the epoxy job over tile wall in a bathroom. We had the temperature between 70 and 75 degrees yesterday in order to apply the epoxy, which is the recommended temperature to apply it. We came back today and the texture was very tacky, and we were called the manufacturer to find out what the cause could be, and we didn't realize that the customer likes the house very cold, so it dropped way below the 70 degree recommended time to cure. So parts of it are still a little bit milky, and then certain parts are still a little bit tacky. So our goal right now is to keep the temperature as high as possible. Since we're within the 24-hour window, we are hoping that it will cure.
And your head shape.
Okay, here we are ready to do the floor epoxy. We did the walls yesterday and now we're working on the floor. This is a little bit of a different epoxy. It's more liquid than the epoxy we used yesterday, which was more like a peanut butter paste. You make sure you have a very, very, very clean bucket. You can get these from any hardware store. Hardener always goes into the bucket first. This is a very important step, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio between your two components. This is your hardener and this is your resin. Okay, so we're gonna pour the hardener into the bucket. Oh, and make sure that your hardener and your resin are between 70 and 75 degrees. It's very, very important for the mixing process and for the application process and for the curing process all together. We're gonna get every little last bit into the bucket. So you have to be patient. And a little tip, make sure you have every tool you can conceive of near you, because once you pour this, you have to work fast. And once you mix this, you have to get it out of the bucket as quickly as possible. We got all the hardener, now we're gonna add our resin. Once you add the resin, you're gonna mix this mixture for 3 minutes. No more, no less. You wanna make sure you scrape the sides, get every little bit out onto your floor, otherwise it will essentially overheat and then you won't be able to use the epoxy, and then you have a huge amount of wasted product that is very costly. So as soon as this is done, I'm gonna go ahead and mix it for 3 minutes.
You want to do a slow stir with this thing. You do not want to use the paddle on your drill gun. You always want to mix it by hand and go really slow to eliminate air bubbles in your epoxy. Now when I pour this out, you want to pour it all out at once. And if you have any air bubbles when you're applying it, use your alcohol. That will help get rid of some of the air bubbles. Like a plastic there, see that? I double coat the whole entire work area. I use plastic. Every time I do another pour, I get rid of the plastic, and I have paper underneath the plastic.
I was making sure to get every little last drop out of that bucket. And the buckets can never be reused. Once you have used it, it will cause a chemical reaction if you try to mix another batch in there.
Real quick. So Dinah is pushing everything away from the drain. It's going to want to run to the lowest point, just like water. So you want to keep pushing away, get everything kind of evenly coated. We're making this, the manufacturer recommends for this amount of square foot for us to use 1 gallon. I think it's way too much, but at 1 gallon, it will give you a quarter, between 1/8 to a quarter-inch surface of epoxy, which is plenty. And as you can see, we're doing it right now. As you can see, when you have bubbles, don't worry about it. Take some alcohol. Watch this.
That's pretty cool.
You can see where we put the tape right here. There is a really nice clean line where we put the tape, and it looks wonderful. So this tape right is meant for epoxy. Don't use blue tape. Blue tape will stick to the epoxy and you'll never get it off. Use the manufacturer recommendations as far as whatever tape you decide to use. Make sure it's not going to stick to the epoxy. Right here, I'm going to be grinding or sanding this down because it started to puddle with the epoxy. You can see the big puddle right here is much thicker than is at the outside edges. Don't panic. After 24 hours, you come back and check your epoxy walls to make sure everything's not tacky, everything's uniform and dry. If it's not dry, do not go on to sanding. You're gonna have to either reapply another coat of epoxy and make sure your mixture ratio is proper according to manufacturer's instructions, or your temperature could have been off and it didn't dry it right. like our one wall did not dry correctly. The other two walls did dry with 90-degree heat in here, but I'm really very unhappy because this wall could have been complete today. I could have sanded this today. So it's kind of being a 4-day project for me. Anyway, this wall is completely done. You can see there's variations in the wall right here. And what I'm going to do next is use the palm sander with 220 grit sandpaper, get off the heavy stuff. Then I'm going to use a polishing paper. I'm going to go up to like 320, maybe 400, and polishing coat over what I sanded off. So here I go. Now I covered the drain line, but when the epoxy flows down with gravity, it's going to be like 1-inch thick over your drain. Don't worry about it. You want to get a 4-inch hole saw, go center where your drain pipe is, and basically just cut it out, which I already did that already. I already started cutting that already, to tell you the truth. Just trying to show you first. And then I take a hammer once that's done, and I just chop it up. What I'm going to do next, Diana, is we're going to take another little vibrating tool. You can see a nice clear line. I'm going to shape this up really nice with my grinder, and it looks perfect. I mean, look at that. I bought longer bolts, made this 1-inch thick for them. Well, maybe 3/4 inch. They're never, ever, ever going to have any problems with this. If it gets scratched, you could polish it. And just like redoing your hardwood floors, you can polish it with 320 grit sandpaper. It looks beautiful. It's so easy. Now, so I'm going to show you right over here. You see the scratches here in the floor? All right, so you want to take 320 grit, which is right here. Now, let's say you had a scratch. Watch this. Hit it super lightly, and it'll polish up. You work your way up in numbers with the sandpaper. If it's too rough, start off with 220, like this. Hit it with 220. I don't know how the scratch actually got here, but it did. And then I'll continue polishing with the 320. I'm doing it by hand, but usually I use the machine. It's really quick. But you get the idea. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and share our channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. This orbital sander, and I'm going to sand this thing. Did I say something wrong?
Orbital.
Let me try this again. Shut it off. Shut it off.